For our folks here who know the little bit about the legend but don't really know your background, growing up, swim, bike, run, really not that much in terms of endurance sports as a young kid.
No, growing up, I was always really sporty, always very self-motivated, driven, determined. Some would say obsessive compulsive.
Nobody would say that. No.
But
No,
I channeled all
no.
of those characteristics into my academic studies. So excelling academically was what was important to me. So sport was something I did recreationally. I did it for fun and as a means of seeing my friends. And I kind of carried that philosophy all the way through to university. I did join the university swimming team, and I drank for them very, very successfully, but was less well known for my sporting prowess in the pool. And after I graduated from university, and I thought at that point that I wanted to be a lawyer. I think I wanted to give myself a label, someone that had done well
doctor,
academically.
yep.
You wanted to be something. So I decided I'll be a lawyer. So I signed for a law firm in London, and they fortunately let me go traveling for what they said would be 9 months, but I came back 2 years later. But while I was traveling through Africa, I started to question the wisdom of my decision to go into law. And it was at that point that I met someone that would change the direction that my life would take. And she said something very simple to me. Her name was Jude, a South African girl. And she said, Chrissy, look deep inside yourself and work out what your passion really is. And I have to admit, at that point, I'd never done that. And I did just as she advised, and realized that my passion ever since I was very young was international development. Not that I knew it as international development growing up, I just knew it as caring passionately about the world and wanting to find a solution.
Make a difference.
Yeah, to the many, many problems that exist in our world. So coming back 2 years later, I decided not to pursue the career in law, but instead to do a master's in international development, international political economy. And it was then I started running.
And then not long after that, you ended up in Nepal and Tibet working on water quality?
Backtrack a little bit. So I started running. I had this battered old pair of sneakers and kind of secondhand clothes. And I hadn't really done that much running before. So I started 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, quite anal obsessive. No, not me. Soon increased. And I got talking to my friend, Amy, and she'd grown up with a heart defect. And the year before had run the London Marathon. And I thought to myself, well, what's stopping me?
You've run for 20 minutes. What's the big deal?
Exactly. Next day, I went to the London Marathon.
The next day?
The next day.
Wait. And how fast did you run?
Well, I trained very hard, but in a very unstructured and unknowledgeable fashion, other than that you just go out and run for the same time, same distance,
every day.
wearing my dodgy sneakers every day. And I somehow managed to pull off a 3:08 in my first London Marathon.
Yeah.
And at that point, I also moved down to London, and I got what was my dream job working for the UK government. So I was a policy advisor to the government on international development policy. Absolutely loved the job. So I worked in that job until September 2004. I was still running a little bit more seriously. I started actually swimming again. But I also realized I wanted to get some experience working in development practice on the ground.
Sure.
And that's when I took myself off, took a sabbatical from my job, and found a very, very high-paid job, Bob.
Big bucks.
Huge bucks, $80 a month, managing water and sanitation projects.
In the Himalayas.
We were based in Kathmandu, but the projects were in the conflict-affected area of the west of Nepal. Day after I arrived, I bought myself a second-hand mountain bike that I nicknamed Premi, which is Nepali for boyfriend.
And so that was your boyfriend?
Rode him every day. Sorry, Bob. Family show.
This is a family
Yeah,
show.
sorry. Sorry. I'll
Hello.
keep it clean. But 2 hours before 2 hours before work, on the weekends we'd go
2 hours.
2
Wow.
hours up and down with my friend.
It's a family show.
You're lowering the tone. With my friend Billy Beerling, who is high altitude climber, Everest summiteer, and lots of Nepali Sherpas. And on the weekends we'd just bike, and then on the Nepali holidays, of which there are many, we took ourselves off on some great adventures, whether it was hiking or cycling. And one that we did, we flew to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, decided we'd bike 1,400 kilometers back to Kathmandu, over the Himalayas.
It's not like these are nice groomed trails and
No.
there's nothing out there.
No, it's totally not, definitely not, smooth tarmac. In fact, no asphalt at all. But we cycled over the Himalayas, all at kind of 16,000 foot via Everest Base Camp.
And did you carry
Back to
panniers,
Kathmandu.
tent, sleeping bag, and that?
Yeah. Our bikes, it was cold up there at night, and we cycled through a lot of sand and snowstorms, and left our bikes outside one night, and they froze. Everything froze. All the components froze.
Wait.
We utilized a very effective solution for de-thawing the bikes. I relieved my morning bladder on the bike to de-thaw it. But no, these were great adventures. And
Well, wait. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because adventures, I think, is what separates you from when people are taking vacation, right? When you're doing vacation, you're going out and you've got a drink with an umbrella, that type of thing. Well, a couple years ago, you went to Brazil for a friend's wedding, right?
Argentina. Yeah.
Argentina, I'm sorry. Argentina, your friend's getting married. Billy Beerling, who's the gal who summited Everest, she's part of the group. And basically, you guys all went on the honeymoon together, right? Group of 6 of you.
Yeah.
And that ride was basically, you're riding over the Andes, and it's going to be multiple days, and you have no idea where you're going, how you're getting there. You're just going. You're up at altitude. You're carrying sleeping bag and tent, and you're lost and out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, we decided to cycle for their honeymoon on a route that had never been cycled before, and for good reason.
And when you went
and
to this,
it was literally push bike. One day we pushed, we averaged 2 kilometers an hour one day over
pushing the bike.
Almost all the time pushing the bike. 20 kilos on the bike,
Sure.
Big heavy mountain bikes, up glaciers and down, and we come across rivers. Oh dear, we haven't got any kind of means to
Tyrolean
get across,
traverse
and
or anything
luckily
like-
they'd packed.
Some ropes.
Honeymoon couple had packed some ropes and carabiners, so we kind of fashioned this pulley system, so we're pulling ourselves across, and then our bikes were pulleyed across, and then we ran out of food, and we had to go to a farmer, and he had to...
before you get too far along in that. So you're out in the middle of nowhere. You've been out there 5 days. You run out of food, and here's this unsuspecting farmer who's got this really nice goat, this whole little herd of goats. And the lovely Chrissy goes up and greets him, right? You go knock on the door. Hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Could I please kill your goat so we have something to eat?
He actually...
Suggested that.
He slaughtered the goat, and we ate it.
I love that. Okay.
Needs must. Anyway, yeah, that was our interesting luna de miel, or the honeymoon, in 2008. But no, seriously, the adventures I had in Nepal, just backtracking, I think were the making of me as a professional athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not even envisaging ever becoming a professional athlete at that point. But I think the physical strength that you get from those adventures kind of fades after a while, especially the gains that you get from altitude. But I think the mental strength, the experiences I had, the difficulties we'd had to endure, the things that I witnessed in terms of what the local population have to go through, I think definitely made me mentally stronger as an athlete, and I utilize a lot of those experiences now when I race.
So you're riding there, and then eventually you come back, and I think you did like 1,000-kilometer ride while you were there, but you come back to England, and when did you do your first triathlon?
Yeah, I came back to England via cycle touring in Argentina and Tasmania and New Zealand, and then I came home. And I came back in May 2006, and I thought, right, I'm going to give this triathlon game a good go. So I entered my first race. It was a super sprint. Wasn't particularly super. Very sprint-like. It lasted about 10 seconds. So I'm this total novice triathlete. So the first rule of triathlon is not to use new equipment day before the race. So I go to my friend, hey, I haven't got a wetsuit, can I borrow one? This is a male friend. He said, yeah, you can borrow this wetsuit. So I kind of try it on day before the race. Oh, this fits okay. And then I jump in the water of, the not so tropical water of the UK in May. And I must have lost like 50 pounds overnight because all of a sudden this wetsuit is far too big. Floods with water, bang, gun goes off, and I try and swim, and I can't lift my arms out of the water, and I have to be rescued by a kayaker and pulled to the side. That was the end of my first race, and that was 6 years ago.
Well, and wait, and you were telling your parents, I'm getting into the sport of triathlon, and they came and watched. That was the first time they saw you race.
Yeah, and they wondered what all the fuss was about and never came back to watch another race until Kona 2008.
After you had won the first time. They didn't even come to the first one. No, I don't blame them. They're like, hey, what the hell? We don't want to watch you get saved again.
You should just sink again.
But after your sinking spell, you go to an Olympic distance race and have a little more success.
Yeah, I managed. I still borrowed a wetsuit, but it fitted this time. I won that race, and that enabled me to qualify for the World Amateur Championships. So at that point, I was training, working for the government again full time, and training as hard as I could. I actually got a coach, and I trained really hard for the World Amateur Championships. Never would I have expected to win that race.
Right.
I mean, it was something that happens to other people. It would never happen to me. And to cross that finish line in first place was a huge, huge surprise. And I realized at that point that I had a very, very big decision to make, whether or not to give up a job that I love and become a professional triathlete. And I have to admit, I was really scared. I was scared of not being able to make a success out of it, scared of not being able to make a living out of it, scared of not enjoying the lifestyle. And I think we're all fearful. We're all fearful definitely of failure, and we're fearful of the unknown, and we're fearful of what we look like in spandex or Elvis costumes.
Why did you look at me when you said that?
No, the Elvis costume.
That sort of bothered me. Oh, yeah, it's just
not
the
that
Elvis
you should
of
be
it.
scared.
Oh,
no,
okay.
you looked wonderful.
Yes.
In spandex.
Exactly. Thank you.
But
Thank you very much.
We can either let those
Thank you.
fears stop us, or we can look them in the face and take a chance. And that's precisely what I did.
And at that point, I mean, you're not like you're 22 years old, right? How old are you at that point?
Practically drawing my pension. I was 30.
Ooh. So at that point, you tracked down Brett Sutton, considered one of the best coaches in the sport of triathlon. And you fly to his training base. He trains people in Switzerland and in Thailand. You go to Switzerland. And you're there to see if you have what it takes to make it as a professional triathlete. And you're counting on Brett Sutton to basically tell you one way or the other. And what was the interaction with Brett? What did he say to you?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Brett basically as the person to give me the yes or no answer. And I went to him, and within a couple of days, he said, well, physically you've got what it takes to, make a career out of triathlon, but I'm going to have to cut your head off. Which was a slightly macabre way of saying that I definitely had work to do mentally.
Right.
And he saw something in me. I guess that I already knew that I couldn't rest my body, and I definitely couldn't rest my mind, that I was over analytical. I was my own worst enemy, intensely self-critical. And he knew that I would have to address those characteristics and strengthen myself mentally, make myself into a true competitor and a true warrior if I was to ever succeed. And I think as I mature as an athlete, that's what I'm trying to do. It's so important not only for me to hone myself physically, but to hone myself mentally. And Brett taught me that from the very first day that I met him.
And you, at that point, we're talking 2007-ish, and the Olympics is coming up in Beijing. You're thinking Olympics. You're thinking trying to make the British team and potentially go into Beijing, right?
Yeah, the intention, it was an outside chance because I was coming at it very late, but was to be definitely to be an Olympic distance athlete. Ironman was something that really crazy people did, not me. Ever.
But the first long distance race he put you in was Alpe d'Huez, which is you ride Alpe d'Huez, all right? And just you're like in the Tour de France, and then at the top, it's a 22-kilometer run, something like that?
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing event. It's not an Ironman in distance, but it's definitely an Ironman in intensity. 2.2K swim, freezing cold water, make sure your wetsuit fits. 115-kilometer bike, which finishes up outdoors, and then, 22K at the top. Totally masochistic, but I loved every single minute of it. Amazing. And at the finish line, Brett said to me, well, do you want to do an Ironman? And all I said to him was, am I ready? And he said, yes. 5 weeks later, I'm on the start line of Ironman Korea.
And you go to Korea, and you...
My road bike.
Your road bike.
Clip-on bars, regular wheels.
Flat tire.
Flat tire, yeah.
And you win.
I even borrowed.
Oh, yeah.
I was so tight with money, I even borrowed my teammates' shorts and tank top. So I was still racing in secondhand clothes even then.
Nice. So you win Korea, and that gets you the golden ticket to come to Kona for the 2007 Ironman. And you're coming in to this race, and you're basically coming to the Super Bowl of triathlon as an unknown. People have no idea who you are. You really don't know much about any of these people. This Kate Major, this Samantha McGlone. All you know is Dave Scott. As you're going by these girls on the bike who've won Ironman before, it's just there's a girl in a ponytail, there's somebody wearing a helmet, there's somebody else, and you're flying through the field. And we're doing the commentary going, who the hell is this? And she's smiling, she's laughing, she's kissing babies. This is the Ironman. She's supposed to be hurting a little bit. How are you? Are you good? Are you having a good race? And she's got, no visor on. She's got sunglasses she got for $20 at some Payless store the day before. We have no idea. She got logos. Looks like she took out her sewing machine and sewed a couple logos on that morning.
With an eye.
The iron-on logos, great. And she wins this thing by 5 minutes over the best people in the world. This is the Super Bowl. She basically, it's like you got some guys from the neighborhood, showed up at the Super Bowl and won. That's basically what Chrissy did. So you win this race, and as you're coming down Ali'i Drive, which is, how many people have come down Ali'i Drive in this audience? Yeah, there's a lot of you. So it's hallowed ground, or a few of you. It's hallowed ground. And you're coming down Ali'i Drive, you're about to win the most important event in the sport. What was going through your mind?
I was wondering what on earth I'd done.
Yeah.
What... I think I was flabbergasted that I was in the position that I was in. Before the race, my measure of success would have been to have been in the top 10.
Right.
That was all I expected of myself, to be in first place, to be winning the biggest event on our sporting calendar was so incredibly surreal. And it was so surreal that those that have been to Hawaii will know the Hawaiians blow into a conch shell and sounds like that, like a cow.
The guys on the side of the road.
As you're coming down the
warriors,
finish chute, and I was, I thought everyone was booing me, and I heard this, and I just thought, this smiley flag waving crazy British person that no one knew who I was, that they were booing me because they didn't want me to win, because they didn't know who I was. So every time I hear that now, it makes me smile. But yeah, it was so incredibly, even more. It was so surreal. to cross that finish line in first place. It was so hugely gratifying. But I also knew as soon as I crossed that line that it was the moment that would change, that had changed my life forever, not just because I'd won the biggest event in our sporting calendar, but because I then had the voice and the platform that I always dreamed of. And I remember vowing as I crossed the line, Chrissy, you've got to use this opportunity and build on this platform. And hopefully in the 5 years since, I've managed to do that.
Yes, you have. And actually, it's interesting because somebody like yourself who is so into world affairs and so into being diverse in your life, being a professional triathlete is very selfish. And there's so much mind-numbing time spent swimming, riding, and running that I'm sure there are points you questioned yourself during those early days. And I think Brett Sutton reassured you that there was a value to what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt initially, becoming a professional triathlete admittedly was incredibly hard. I found the lifestyle incredibly difficult in the first 6 months actually. And one of the things I was having difficulty coming to terms with was that I felt that it was a selfish occupation, that everything I was doing was for me and me alone. And I remember saying that to Brett, and I said, Brett, I don't know how long I can do this for. And he said, Chrissy, just you wait. Within a couple of years, through your achievements in the sport, you'll be able to affect more positive change than you ever thought possible. And that simple prophecy has come true.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, I know why winning now is so important to me. I mean, yes, I strive to be the best athlete I can be. I love the fight. I love the competition. I love the war. I'm fiercely competitive. But also I want to race for a cause that's bigger than me. Try and race for a reason, and long after my records are broken and my legacy in terms of what I've achieved in the sport may be forgotten or diminished, the real impact, the inspiration, the encouragement that I can give to others, the profile that I can raise of the charities that I support, I think that's the enduring legacy that I'd like to leave.
So you go back to Kona in 2008 and you win by 15 minutes. And you go back in 2009 and win by 29 minutes. Right. And then 2010, she's on a little bit of a roll. Go back in 2010 and the night before the race, you go to bed and you wake up in the morning and you're sick and you know you can't race. How tough was it for you as at that point, 3-time defending champion, not being able to go to the starting line and defend your title?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I was devastated not to be able to start the race that I'd worked so hard for and not do justice to all the hard work that I and my coach and my support team, my sponsors had put into getting me there. I felt that not only was I letting myself down, I was also letting other people down, and that was something that stayed with me for quite a while. And long after my physical health had improved, I think I still had to heal myself mentally. But I always remember J.K. Rowling, the famous author, before Harry Potter, she said that rock bottom was the foundation from which she rebuilt her life. And I mean, I didn't reach rock bottom necessarily by not racing Kona, but it felt like that at the time. Sure. But I think with hindsight, it was the foundation from which I rebuilt my triathlon career, and I think it reignited the fire in me. I realized then just how much being world champion meant to me and how much I wanted to regain that crown the next year. And I think in the performances since, I've benefited actually from not racing in Kona, just because it stoked that fire and it made me a lot stronger
Right.
mentally, and I went on to race in Arizona and then Roth.
Broke Ironman record there.
Yes.
And then went to Roth and broke the record there and ran 2:44, fifth overall. I think the second fastest marathon of the day. Pretty impressive. And then you're rolling into Kona. Training is going phenomenally well. I know you were thinking of potentially running in the 240s in Kona last year. And less than 2 weeks before the race, you have a little bit deflated front wheel and go down a horrific crash. I mean, I think a lot more, when we hear somebody went down, it's like, okay, she went down, she'll be fine. But you weren't fine. Your body was pretty torqued from that crash.
Yeah, 2 weeks 2 weeks before the race, you're right, I had a deflated flat. We took a corner that we'd take thousands of times, and I end up on the floor and leave half of my left side of my body on the asphalt in Colorado. But yeah, I had second and third degree burns on my legs and torn or pulled pec muscle and a lot of internal bruising. Everything got totally infected. So 8 days before the race, I couldn't even walk on one leg. I tried to swim, and I managed one length. Dave had to lift me out of the pool and carry me like a baby to the car. I postponed my flight to Kona. So going into the race, not only was I physically compromised, but just mentally riddled or almost crippled with self-doubt. And any athlete, whether they're pro or amateur, I think that can definitely be your undoing. And yeah, it was a very difficult week going into Kona. I was taken into hospital on the Tuesday because they wanted to test for pulmonary embolisms because I was still getting pains in my chest, which was from this pull muscle. And then the next day I had to go back into the burns unit and have everything scrubbed out, which was really pleasant.
Yeah, it feels good, right?
Yeah, it feels really nice. And then all, wrapped up. So I didn't swim, from a failed attempt again on the Tuesday all the way through till race day.
And you're on antibiotics at the same time.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, because your body's pretty ravaged. So on race morning, knowing that your body is compromised and not having swam in a week, I'm sure your confidence level was not very high going into the swim. But when we see you get out of the water, 101, your slowest ever swim, you've got a smile like that one, right? She's got this huge smile coming out of the water. Oh, she's only about 12 minutes down to the lead. She's never been this far down, and she's smiling. I mean, what was going through your head when you were coming out of the water?
I had to modify my expectations going into that race. Ordinarily, I never take the win for granted, but I was always determined to fight for that victory. But going into the race, I did not think that I could fight for the victory. I knew that I would finish. I thought I'd be walking. So I lined up on the start line just wanting to do the very, very best with the body and the mind that I had on the day. And that was very much my mindset. I just wanted to get through the swim without pain. I thought I'd be sinking halfway to Japan, actually. So when I got out of the swim and I wasn't in as much pain as I thought I would be, and I knew I could carry on, I was actually incredibly happy.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lesson to us all to stay very much in the moment, whether you're running a half marathon, a full marathon, a half Ironman, a full Ironman. So you've got to stay in the moment. You can't get too carried away. You can't think about, what's going to happen at 30K on the run. You've just got to stay in the moment. And I thought, right, awesome. I'm out of the swim. Let's get to work on the bike. And, you do have to do that. You have to focus on every single swim stroke, every single pedal stroke.
And I happened to be embedded with Team Welly that day, the entire Wellington family. They had a caravan of like 5 vans. We drive out to Javi. And remember, she's won by 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and 29 minutes. Team Welly is used to seeing her at Javi, and again, it's kissing babies, waving to crowds. She's 20 minutes down. And mom and dad are like, what is going on here? This is a race. And they were freaked. And same a couple miles into the run. Chrissy was still 20 minutes down. How do you keep it together when you're used to being off the front and now you're the hunter rather than the person being hunted?
I think that's where the mental strength comes into play. And I think we all know that our sport is, as much mental as it is a physical challenge. But I think it's too late in a race to realize that you haven't used training to develop the mental tools and strategies that you need to be able to cope with pain and discomfort on race day. And I know that people think that, in watching me, that I find racing easy, aside from Kona last year, but I most definitely don't. But I've endured as much pain and discomfort as you guys, but I've also developed ways of overcoming that. And I utilized all of those strategies at Kona to fight that voice that was in my ear all the time, just saying, quit, 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 quit. And you fight that voice with various tools and strategies, whether it be the mantra, that I have in my mind all the time, whether it's the songs that I have playing in my head, whether it's the poem that means so much to me, whether it's images of family and friends. And I definitely recall times in previous races and in training where I've hurt like hell and managed to overcome it. Because that gives me the self-belief and the self-confidence that, if I can overcome it then, I can overcome it now. So I'd encourage all of you, when you do a session that you don't think that you can do or you don't want to do, you get yourself out the door, you just try it, you test your limits. And when you come back, you really bank that feeling. Because in races, that's what you'll remember. You'll think about that training session that you didn't think that you could do. And you'll override the discomfort that you feel. And just using all of those strategies enabled me to cope with the pain that I was in. I also think breaking the race down, aid station to aid station, or my family are going to be at 3 miles, so I'll just carry on until I see them, and then maybe I'll pull to the side. And then, of course, at 3 miles you don't, and then you go to the next aid station. But you play those tricks with yourself. And I guess ultimately I also recall the causes that I race for, and that is a firework up my backside, particularly when I recall people like John Blaze that have really overcome adversity and huge levels of discomfort to achieve their goals. It enables me to put my discomfort in perspective.
Right. So in this race, the women's field has become so good and so deep in the last number of years. You're racing Mirinda Carfrae, who's the best runner in the sport. She's a defending champion, and she goes out and runs 2:52:09 off the bike. If you cracked for a second, she would have been on you. But you run 2:52:41 and end up holding her off. Your closest ever Ironman, 2:43 between you and Mirinda. So the pressure was on the entire time. Coming down Ali'i Drive, obviously realizing people weren't booing. They were conching, but they weren't booing. You're coming down Ali'i Drive. You are winning a race that you've always said your ultimate goal was to have a race where there was absolutely nothing left. That you gave everything that your body had, mentally, physically. You did it all to get to that line. And I'm guessing that day was everything and more that you wanted.
Yeah, I'd always wanted a race where, firstly, the race within myself, where I felt that I'd given it, like you said, absolutely everything mentally and physically. And I don't know whether I'd ever done that before Kona last year. And I crossed that finish line physically and emotionally annihilated. And that was so incredibly gratifying. But not only that, I had... Does
that sound a little sick to you guys? Sounds a little sick to me, but that's okay, yeah.
But not only that, I had the race with my competitors that I'd always wanted. I had the war and the battle and the fight that I crave.
Yeah.
And Kona gave me that. And I realized maybe at the end of Kona last year that I was truly worthy of being called a world champion because I'd overcome adversity. And I think that made that race, my finest racing hour, and it was very empowering and liberating experience for me.
So the book, A Life Without Limits. I mean, when you look at that race, that was a race without limits because you dug so deep. Take us back to writing the book, and I mean, you share. It's not a training book. it's a book. It's basically you telling all. So what led to you writing the book, and what do you want the reader to gain from it?
Yeah, the book's been a long time in coming, about a year and a half. Up until Kona last year, I didn't have a title. And I realized at Kona that I was still setting these preconceived limits on what I thought I could do. You know, I could never go 8:18, or I could never run that far, or I could never win Kona. And every time I've approached those limits, they've kind of dissolved into the distance, and that's what gave me the inspiration for the book. But you know, any author has different reasons for writing a book. I think the first, admittedly, is quite selfish, and I did crave the intellectual challenge. I missed the intellectual challenge that I had in my previous job,
Right.
and I craved that kind of, I guess, the challenge that comes from the process of cathartic self-reflection. It's really, really difficult, very demanding, but it was very, very enjoyable. Secondly, I wanted to use the book as a means of thanking people, both those in my close circle of friends, you know, my friends, my family, my sponsors, my coach, but also the volunteers, the spectators, the crowd, and all of you guys, because without your support, the support of the crowds, the spectators, the race directors, I couldn't perform as I do, and you inspire me each and every day. And that's why I wrote one of the chapters, The Heroes of Ironman, and what you'll notice is all but one of them are age group athletes.
Right.
Because hopefully the pros do inspire the age groupers, but the process is reciprocal. And so it was my way of saying thank you to all of you for what you've given me. I think thirdly, the book was a vehicle for me of conveying some really important life lessons, really important messages that I wanted to convey. But I knew that in order to be able to effectively convey those messages, I had to humanize myself. I think sometimes one sees professional athletes as kind of bionic superhumans, and you can't identify with us. And I knew that in order to enable the messages to resonate with you guys, I had to expose the real me. So my strengths, my weaknesses, my fears, my concerns, problems, you know, my battles with body image, and the fact that I've had eating disorders growing up. All of these things hopefully make you realize that I'm a normal human being, and that I've had problems to encounter just like all of you guys have. But I've managed to overcome them and go on to achieve my goals. And if I can do that, then you can too. And it might not necessarily take you to the top of the world, but it will enable you to achieve your dreams. So I think, like I said, the book was a way of trying to convey those kind of messages and inspire and encourage people through my words. And you're right, it's not a Chrissy training Bible. There are tips, you know, training, nutritional, motivational, mental training tips woven into the prose, but I didn't want to write a book that appealed solely to triathletes. What I wanted to do is try and create a book that transcended our sport and that appealed to people that had never heard of triathlon, that had never heard of me. And if they could have the book in their hands and it inspires them to get off the couch and do a 5K, dress up as Elvis, do the half marathon, take up triathlon,
Thank you very
then
much.
we can help take our sport out of its niche and into the majority and the mainstream where it truly does belong. So that was, I guess, my last intention with the book, was to try and create a book that transcended our sport and inspired not only all the triathletes in the world, but the everyday person to get up and live their life without limits.
What I love is after every race that I've seen Chrissy at, she comes back down at midnight to be there, dancing, hanging out, just greeting every age grouper coming across the line, a number of people come up to me and go, I did a race in Kansas last week, and Chrissy was there to put a medal on me. It means so much for all of all the age groupers, all of us, to have pros who feel like it's all one big family. I mean, how important is that for you to come back out and be with the age groupers?
Yeah, I mean, there's many things I love about the sport, but one thing I think that is wonderful and very unique about our sport is the amateurs get to race on the same stage, on the same day, in very close proximity to the professionals, and that's really, really rare. And I think for us, and hopefully for you guys, it's a privilege.
It is.
And for me to be able to share that stage is an honor. And like I said, I always want to try and A, extend my thanks to the age groupers, and B, try and inspire and encourage as many people as I possibly do. And that's why I go back to the finish line, just to give a piece of myself, so that people leave the race feeling that they've had a piece of me.
A unique experience.
Yeah, and it means a lot to me to always go back. And it's, you know, some of my most fondest and strongest memories are actually of you know, midnight of an Ironman, rather than the moment I actually crossed the line.
Love it. How about a big round of applause? The one, the only, Chrissie Wellington.